they can become very toxic. So basically, what I think happens is they're miserable in their home country. They come out here looking for paradise, and they bring their misery with them. And eventually, they become miserable here and toxic. Hello again, it's JJ and the Lonely Bull in Asia channel. Today, we want to talk about pros and cons of the United States versus the Philippines. We're going to do that next. Okay, so what I want to do today is kind of compare, since I've lived here in the Philippines now for 2 years in BGC, I want to do a comparison. A lot of my subscribers, I did a survey on my community page, and a lot of subscribers said they want to see a pros and cons comparison of the US versus the Philippines. So I'm going to do that. Now, let me kind of qualify this, because most of the comments I'm going to do, most of the comparisons I'm going to do will relate more to BGC than to the Philippines in general, just because of the fact that I've lived here for 2 years and I have traveled outside of BGC quite a bit, so I know a lot of the provinces, and I know that. So, but when a lot of the pros and cons will relate to BGC mainly. So let's start with the US. Okay, so the United States, first of all, we'll do a pro and then a con. We'll go back and forth, and then I'll do the Philippines. So number one, and these aren't necessarily in any order, but the first pro of living in the U.S. would be the seasons. I just love the different seasons. Now, I'm not a big fan of the extreme cold winters in the Midwest where I grew up, but I love the springs. They're just amazing. The summers are awesome because you get to get outside and do a lot of things. And the falls are amazing, that crisp, clean temperatures and that weather. And then, of course, you know, with the fall comes football season, which I just absolutely love. So the seasons would be my number one pro, or not my number one, but my first pro as living in the U.S., because you don't get those in the Philippines. You don't get a lot of seasons. Now, you get a little cooler temperatures. Instead of 95, it might be 85 during the day for about 3 months out of the year. So basically, you have your hot season and your rainy season here in the Philippines, and a little cooler hot season. So, but the seasons would definitely be a big plus, a big pro for me. It just mixes things up a little bit, and it gives you a little bit of variety during your year. The first con about living in the U.S. would be the political climate, and it's gotten so bad in the last 5 or 6 years or 10 years. I mean, it's gotten to a point where it was one of the main reasons I wanted to get out of the U.S., because it got so bad and it's so toxic, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And you lose a lot of friends over politics, and it's sad, but it's true. And you know, some people would rather place their political position ahead of their friends and even some of their families. So that makes it kind of tough. So that would be a big con for me living in the U.S., just that political climate that just seems to get worse every day. That's just something I could definitely live without. Second pro living in the U.S. would be live sports events and live music and sports. That is something, you know, the sports I like are the ones that I grew up with, watching and going to these events when I was growing up in the U.S., like college football, pro football, baseball, professional baseball. Those are the three main things. Even basketball, college basketball and professional basketball to an extent. But it's just fun, you know, it's an event. So you get to go to these games live and see these events live. And you just don't have that here in the Philippines. Because, you know, when you grow up in the U.S., you grow up loving certain teams and loving certain sports that you can't get outside of the U.S. So the NFL, college football, professional baseball. Now, granted, they do play in other countries, limited, but But as far as I know, they've never played one of those sports in the Philippines. They've never come over here. So that would be a huge trip to make just to play one game. Um, so those things, if going to baseball games, I love taking my son when he was young, taking him to Cincinnati Reds baseball games, and that was so much fun, and just rooting for Ken Griffey Jr. or Joey Votto or whatever. Um, but that was a lot of fun. And of course, Nebraska. Growing up in Nebraska, you got to be a Nebraska football fan. So you grow up loving Nebraska football and going to the games, and that's such a big event. So that's one of the pros living in the U.S. That would be a big pro. Um, a big con would be the inflation and the cost of living. You can lump those two in together because they're both related. But the last 3 or 4 years, the cost of living has just skyrocketed, and with inflation going out of control in the U.S. And it's that way globally too, but it's really bad in the U.S. It was already expensive to live there, and now it's almost unlivable for, we're losing a lot of the middle class in the U.S. because of the wages not being where they need to be, and that inflation so high and the cost of living so high. So, I'm paying about 1/3 here in BGC for my cost of living as what I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the Midwest, where you would think the cost of living would be low, and it is essentially low. It's lower than the coasts, but it's still high compared to here. And I was able to retire early here living in the Philippines because of the cost of living here in the Philippines compared to the U.S. If I had moved back to the U.S. after my job ended here, there would be no way I could afford to retire. I would still have to be working and basically just living a minimal life there because of the inflation and the cost of living being so high. But there would be no way I could retire on the income I'm making now, still living in the U.S. I would have to work till I was 70, and that was my plan originally. But when I moved out here, I realized that I could live a lot cheaper and I could retire a lot earlier. So I'm enjoying life now. So that would be a, a definite con, would be the inflation there. Number three, again, these aren't necessarily in any order, but pro being in the U.S. would be family and friends. I love my family, and I have some close friends, especially ones from college. And I was back last September and October, so I got to see them. I got to see my family, or most of my family. That's a big plus. Being able to see them and reach out to them on a regular basis. Now, being the lonely bull I am, I traveled a lot when I lived in the U.S. too. So I didn't see them on a regular basis because I was scattered all over the U.S. With my job. So it was tough to see them anyway because it was so expensive to fly or make a trip to see my family or my friends. So that made it kind of tough. But pro is that you're in the same country, so you've got that opportunity to get out there and see your family and see your friends. So number three on the con list would be crime and safety. That's gotten out of hand too, and I read all about it. I hear all about it now in the news. It's just really out of control, and even in the smaller cities, you run the risk of having issues with safety and crime. And when I was back in October, I was back in Texas with my cousin. We were down in San Antonio, and we went to the riverfront there, the Riverwalk, and it's a really neat area. And I loved that was my first time in San Antonio, and I absolutely loved it. But there was times there. It was a Saturday night, and it was nighttime, and we're walking around. There's a lot of people, but I was walking around with my handheld and doing videos of the neighborhood there and the Riverwalk. And I got to some areas, and I look over my shoulder, and there's a couple of kind of fishy looking dudes following me around, and I felt uncomfortable. I didn't feel completely safe. Whereas here in the Philippines, I've never felt threatened. I've never felt that my safety is in danger, and obviously you're always aware of your surroundings, and I do that whether I'm in, even when I'm in BGC. But BGC is a super safe city, a super safe area. But even when I'm outside of BGC in Taguig or Makati, or in some areas, it's still relatively safe, and I don't feel threatened. I don't feel my safety is an issue, but I do, kind of stay aware of my surroundings just because of that. But that would be a big con for me, the safety aspect and the crime aspect in the U.S. that has gotten so bad and so out of control. And it just seems like, especially in some of the larger cities, the local governments there, they don't care. They don't care. They're letting these people commit these crimes and releasing them. And I've even read and heard that a lot of these cities are saying that, oh, if you have a theft of under $1,000, you're not going to get arrested. You're not going to get convicted. What? That's incredibly ridiculous. So yeah, that's a big con for me. Number 4 on the pro side is the Western food. The Western food options there obviously are great. I mean, not just the franchises that you can get over here in the Philippines or in Southeast Asia, but just your general local foods. They've got some fantastic. Even growing up in my my hometown of Fremont, there's some really good local restaurants there, and in that surrounding community and surrounding area, these small towns. I mean, my cousin took me to this restaurant outside of Fremont. I can't remember. Might have been Schuyler or Scribner, or maybe I can't remember where it was. But it took me to a steakhouse there, and I had the prime rib, and oh my God, it was so good. I mean, like that thick and this big around, and I hadn't had prime rib since I moved out of the U.S. And oh my gosh, it was so good. So that's a big pro. Some of the food choices there. Of course, being from Nebraska, if you know Runzas, I love Runzas. So every time I go back, I got to load up on Runzas sandwiches. If you don't know what a Runza is, you got to Google it. You got to look it up. But it's only Nebraska. My dream is to open up the first the first Runza franchise here in the Philippines. That would be awesome. But yeah, just the food choices, big pro, big plus. Being in the U.S. Another con is just the unfriendliness of people. That just in recent years, people have gotten so unfriendly. It's hard to even strike up a conversation with someone just passing by, or you're in a bar or something without the conversation getting mean within minutes because you said something they don't like, or whatever, vice versa. So, and it's really that's really tough. And people, you walk around on the street, they won't say hi to you. They won't even look at you. It's just a completely different feel than it used to be. And I know there's probably areas in smaller towns where they're still friendly, but it's getting bad everywhere there. And the road rage is horrible. I see all the time that there's road rage going on, and that's never a good thing. And it's just getting really bad there. So you're afraid to say anything to anybody, I guess, because you're afraid of any repercussion. And also you see people all the time. You see these videos all the time of people getting attacked on subways or train platforms or wherever, and people will just stand around. They won't help, and I saw the other day. I don't know, it was the other day a while back, but I saw a video the other day. I don't know how long ago, but somebody tried to intervene with someone in trouble, and they're the ones who got chastised for helping out. So it's almost like you can't even help out anymore in the U.S. So that's a huge con in my book. Finally, number 5 pro in the U.S. is convenience. It's everything is there. You go to a grocery store and you've got everything you could possibly want, every brand, every make, everything. You can go and you get any type of car you want, and they got these huge uh, dealerships now, these mega dealerships, and it's got every make and model of car that you could ever want. So you don't even have to drive very far, because they're all in one place. It's all one size fits all basically. And then, these huge supermarkets and Walmarts and Costco's and all these places where you can go in and you can get anything you want. These big box stores, they've got it all. They've got everything. And the only drawback to that is, yeah, it's convenient, it's great, but these smaller ma and pa uh, grocery stores and stores like that, they've really they've been driven out of business basically, and especially since COVID, but even before that, because of these big box stores like Walmarts and Targets and that have just taken over, because they can buy in such bulk that they can offer these items for a lot less, and they offer everything. So, but on the other side is, it's a huge convenience for you. So you just one-stop shop. Just walk into a Walmart or a Super Walmart or a Costco or whatever, and you can get everything from groceries to furniture and anything in between, electronics and all that, and at probably a cheaper cost. So that's a huge plus. And the last thing on the con side, I would say, would be, and this is just me, but the extreme cold. Oh my gosh, the older I get, the harder it is for me to be able to handle the cold. And the last time I was there, living there in the winter, would have been the winter of 2021. Oh my gosh, it was bitterly cold. It was like one of the coldest winters on record. And if it gets below 50 anymore for me, I'm out. I'm checking out. I'm staying indoors. I'm hibernating until spring. So the extreme cold would be a big con for me. Now, obviously, it's not that way in the entire country of the United States, but most of the places I've lived, you get that extreme cold. Where I grew up in Nebraska, I lived in Colorado and Kansas, and Indiana. You get those extremes. Even in Kentucky and Tennessee and Texas, where I also lived and worked in those states, you can still get some extreme periods of cold. So, and it may not be like below zero necessarily, but it's below 50, and that's cold for me. So, all right, let's move to the Philippines. Let's talk about the pros and cons of the Philippines. And like I said before, a lot of this will be me talking mainly about BGC, because I've lived here for 2 years, but I have been outside of BGC, so I've been outside of the bubble. So don't get on me about you don't know anything about the Philippines. I've stayed in the provinces. I've been outside of BGC and Metro Manila, so I know. I've had girlfriends that live in the provinces, so I've gone to their places, so I know what that's like. But most of these pros and cons are going to be basically about BGC and maybe Metro Manila area. So number one pro, and this includes everybody in the Philippines, is just their friendliness. They're overall friendly people. You can walk around, and this is especially true outside of BGC and outside of Metro Manila. When you're in the provinces, you walk around and you say hello to a Filipino, they'll smile. They got the best smiles in the world, and they'll say hi to you. They're super friendly. They'll invite you to their house. They'll feed you, and they won't think twice about it. So just the friendliness of the people in general. Now, you will come across some people that aren't as friendly as others, so that happens everywhere. But I would say the majority of Filipino that I've come across are super friendly, and they've got that beautiful smile, and they've got that boisterous, contagious laugh, and it's just great to see and hear. And they're just really super friendly. So that would be my number one pro. Again, these aren't necessarily in any order, but that would be the first one I would list. Number one on the con side in the Philippines is the pollution, especially in the larger cities like Cebu and Metro Manila. You know, I live in BGC and I'm on the 29th floor of my condo, and it's a corner unit, and it overlooks Makati and also Manila Bay. But you can see there's some days where you can't see to the bay, or you can barely see past the first buildings in Makati because the pollution is so heavy in that area that it just really it's just thick with a haze. So that would be, it doesn't really affect me when I'm outside. I don't really notice it that much, but it is noticeable. And that's because of all the buses and the jeepneys and the motorcycles, and the traffic is so heavy there. So that would be a big con for me. Um, Number two on the pro side would be the ease of traveling outside of the country. So you could fly to other Southeast Asian countries very cheap. It doesn't cost anything. I was looking up, so I'm planning on getting to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia this year, and I'm looking at prices, airline prices. I can get a round trip ticket in May for $111, 111 US dollars for a round trip ticket from Manila to Kuala Lumpur and back for a 2-week stay in Kuala Lumpur. That's crazy cheap. And you know, and even going to, I looked up tickets to Tokyo, and it's like $200 round trip to Tokyo, depending on when you go. But you can find some really cheap flights. You know, I was just in Thailand a couple of months ago, and the cost of my ticket to fly there and back was under $200, about $173, I think it was, something around there. So it's super cheap to fly. So that would be a huge pro, because you're in an area where, pretty much anywhere in Southeast Asia, you're in an area where you can fly to these other Southeast Asia countries on a dime, basically, and you can have these holidays and have them really cheap. You can basically go on a 1-week vacation for under $1,000 if you want. I mean, where can you do that in the U.S.? Probably nowhere, you know, and definitely not flying. No, that's not going to happen. So that's a huge plus, being able to fly outside the country to another Southeast Asian country very easily and very cheap. So that's a big plus. On the con side, some expats that live in the Philippines are very toxic. Now, I know that's kind of a blanket statement. I'm not saying all expats. I'm not going to, narrow it down to one particular country or whatever, because it comes in all shapes and sizes. But there are some expats and some expat areas, you know, some cities or provinces that there are a lot of expat population, that they've become very toxic. I'm sure you've heard everything about it in all the vloggers here, the YouTubers here in the Philippines. But yeah, they can become very toxic. So basically, what I think happens is they're miserable in their home country. They come out here looking for paradise, and they bring their misery with them. And eventually, they become miserable here and toxic, and they spread that around. So generally what happens, so let me tell you a little story. Back in 2016, I was planning on taking a job to teach English as a second language in China. And the company I was going to work for, one of the things they told me during my training was, when you move to China, don't make a lot of friends with expats. Make some friends, keep your circle small, but make friends with locals too. Keep a good mix of that, because if you just have expat friends, you're going to sit around and you're going to talk with the expats, and they're going to start complaining about their life, their daily life there, and about the things they hate about living in China or living overseas. And then eventually you're going to suck in all that negative, toxic energy, and you're going to start spewing out the same stuff, and you're going to be miserable too. So that's what happens here in the Philippines. You get a lot of these foreigners that come here thinking life's going to be great because it's going to be so cheap. I'm going to be happy. And then they start seeing a few things that they don't like. Like, maybe the customer service isn't the same that they're used to. Maybe they can't get the same amenities that they're used to getting in their home country. And, this, that, and the other thing. And eventually those things are going to pile up on them, and they're going to start spewing that negative, toxic energy around and bitch and complain about all this. And it's just going to be nasty, and it's not fun at all. And you just avoid that. But anyway, so that's one of the cons, and has nothing to do with the Philippines. It has to do with the expats or the foreigners that come here that become negative. So that's a huge negative. Number 3 for the positive side is the cost of living. Cost of living is super cheap here. I spend about a third of what I would spend in the U.S. when I was living there. Everything from my rent to the food to the transportation to the utilities, everything's a lot cheaper here than it ever was in the U.S. And I know prices are going up everywhere, and the Philippines is no longer the cheapest area or the cheapest country in Southeast Asia in which to live, but the U.S. is definitely not cheap. Even in the Midwest, it's expensive. I was spending about $1,500 a month for my little townhouse in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm spending a little over $600 a month for my corner unit condo here in BGC, with a beautiful view of the golf course and the polo grounds and the Makati skyline in the background. So I'm super happy, and I'm spending so much less than I ever did in the United States. So anyway, so cost of living is a big plus for the Philippines. A con would be the infrastructure and the traffic. That's another con. The infrastructure is not as good as a lot of other Southeast Asian countries like Thailand or even Vietnam or Malaysia, Japan. But a lot of those countries have great infrastructure. It's not so great here. There are some areas that are okay, but they're a little behind on that. So traffic can be real hectic if you're driving around the Metro Manila area, or if you're in Cebu. I understand the traffic's gotten really bad there, even in like Dumaguete, which is a small community, but they don't have any traffic lights. They've got a ton of people there now, so the traffic can be really bad in some areas, in some cases, sometimes during the day. So just the traffic and the infrastructure, how it's built, is not as good as a lot of Southeast Asian countries, and obviously not as good as the U.S. So that would be a negative. That would be a con side. Back on the pro side, dating is a lot easier here than it is or was when I was in the U.S. I tell you, I could date young girls if I wanted to. I'm talking of age, obviously. If I wanted to date somebody in their 20s, I could. I choose not to. I want to date somebody older because I figure they're a little more mature. We have more in common. They're more apt to want to be in a relationship long term, but I don't know that for a fact. But I just feel more comfortable dating someone a little older. But not to say that I haven't had the opportunities to date younger women. That's there, and if that's your thing, if you want to be a player or whatever, you want to come out here and date younger women, you've got that opportunity here. You can date pretty much any age you want here, and they're going to be open to that relationship. So dating here in the Philippines and Southeast Asia is a big plus. It's going to be easier for you because they don't have that toxic masculinity thing that's prevalent in the West, and especially in the U.S. A lot of women in the U.S. have really gotten away from the traditional lifestyle that you can find here in the Philippines, And I'm not saying you're tying your girlfriend or your wife to the stove in the kitchen and make them, be a slave to that. No, but a lot of the Filipinos, they want to do that. My girlfriend, she doesn't even want me to be in the kitchen most of the time. If I try to cook, she'll like try to get me out of the way and take over. Um, it's dating is easier here, a lot easier than it is in the West, um, and it's been that way for a long time. Both, in the West it's been rough. If you're an older guy, I would say 45 plus, and you're single and you're in the dating zone in the U.S., it's tough for you. It's really tough. So good luck if you're doing that. Here in the Philippines, it's a lot easier. So you're going to find yourself in a lot better shape. So that would be a big plus. On the con side, poverty is just prevalent here. I know in BGC it's a bubble, so they keep that element out, so you don't really see it here. But when you get out of BGC, when you get into Taguig proper, when you get into Guadalupe or some of the barangay around here, or some of the areas in Manila, you're going to see a lot of poverty, and it's sad. It's a culture shock when you first move here. That's a big con. If that's something that's going to be tough for you, and you can't get used to that culture shock, then maybe the Philippines isn't the place for you. But that's a big con. I mean, that's a big negative. Seeing the poverty in the Philippines, that's really tough. Back on the pro side. It's really cheap if you want to fly to other islands here in the Philippines. It's cheap to fly there generally. I took a trip to Bacolod, which is in Negros Occidental, and I flew there for I think $30, and that was super cheap. I think $60 round trip, less than $60 round trip. Now some areas, like Dumaguete seems to be a popular destination, so it may cost you a little more. Maybe flying to Cebu might be cheap. It just depends on when you go and how far out you book your flight. But you can go to a lot of provinces and a lot of different areas, a lot of different islands. You can fly there super cheap. Now, if you want to go to some of the tourist areas like Boracay or Palawan, your tickets are probably going to be a little higher, just because that's a big destination. So you got to time your when you want to go there, and maybe go when it's low season and it's not as expensive. Now in low season you may run into issues of the rainy season. So if you want to head out to the beach and it's going to be rainy, that might not be a good destination for you. So, but generally speaking, flying from one island to another is a lot cheaper than it would be to fly from one city to another in the U.S. So that's a huge pro. The final con in the Philippines is the noise. And just as I say that, they're grinding coffee. That's not a big deal, but when you're outside, you got loud motorcycles, you got loud jeepneys, if you're in the provinces, you got roosters crowing night and day. You've got dogs barking all the time, even here in BGC, because BGC is a huge pet-friendly area. People bring their dogs out. You'll see strollers, baby strollers, and about 75% of the strollers have dogs in them, not babies. So, and there are these little yippy yappy dogs that are always barking, and the owners don't seem to care. So, if noise is going to be an issue with you, you're going to get noise overload here. They play the music in the restaurants and the bars super loud. I've said so many times, they put it at 11. If it goes to 10, they're setting it at 11. They don't want the people in their restaurant to hear. They want the people 14 blocks away to hear. And meanwhile, the people in the restaurant, their ears are bleeding because it's so loud. But that's just the way it is, and you've got karaoke going all the time in the neighborhoods and the barangays. So just know that sometimes it can be sensory overload with the noise here in the Philippines, it can be that way. So there's some days where I just got to go back inside my condo and just chill, because it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. Generally, I can handle it, but sometimes you get that where it's a little bit of a overload. So if noise is an issue for you, then this might be a con for you. So those are my pros and cons of both the U.S. and the Philippines. I'm picking the Philippines. I'm still here, right? So I'm picking the Philippines to live. Unless something else changes drastically, I'm going to stick with it. So I love the Philippines. I love Southeast Asia. I love BGC, Bonifacio Global City. So let me know in the comments below what you think, what your lists are. If you got any pros and cons from either the Philippines or the U.S., let me know if yours differ from mine. But hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, mabuhay, live life, my friend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.